Poštovani gledalci, dobrodošli u još jedno izdanje emisije Granice Istoka. Ja sam Harun Karčić. Jedna od najvećih seizmičkih promjena na geopolitičkom planu Bliskog Istoka nakon kraja hladnog rata jeste rastuće prisustvo Narodne republike Kine na Bliskom Istoku. Nakon višedecenijskog odsustva, Kina se pojavljuje kao jedan od glavnih igrača u regionu. Kina uvozi blizu 40% nafte i plina sa Bliskog Istoka, a njena trgovinska razmjena s tim regionom uvećana je za preko 600% u proteklih 10 godina. Zbog čega su zemlje Bliskog Istoka važne Kini, kakva je priroda kineske politike i investicija i zašto je Pakistan važan u svemu tome, analiziramo u nastavku emisije. Prije razgovora sa našim gostima, pogledajmo uvodni prilog o kineskim ambicijama na Bliskom Istoku.
Ovo je luka Džibuti, glavni grad male zemlje sa velikim snovima. U luku ulaze $100 miliona stranih investicija, obećavajući da će ovaj nekada uspavani grad pretvoriti u prometni komercijalni centar. Džibuti je smešten na obali mora za Bab el Mandeb, značajnog morskog koridora na putu prema Crvenom moru. Na najužoj tački Bab el Mandeba samo 30 km deli Džibuti od Jemena. Koristeći svoj geografski položaj, ova zemlja se polako pretvara u veliki brodarski centar. Kineski radnici ovde grade 4. luku u Džibutiju. Geografski položaj privukao je pažnju i svetskih sila, koji su postale još jedan veliki izvor prihoda ove zemlje. U Džibutiju se nalaze brojne baze stranih vojnika, uključujući najveću američku bazu u Africi. Iz ovih vojnih postrojenja u Džibutiju pokreću se kontraterorističke operacije u Jemenu i Somaliji. Ovo je Camp Lemonnier, baza koja američkoj vojsci omogućava da vrši napade na Al-Kaidu i njene saveznike u Somaliji i Jemenu. Pentagon je također koristio Džibuti kao bazu za obuku američkih snaga i napade bespilotnim letjelicama. Tokom godina brojne druge zemlje, uključujući Nemačku, Japan i Španiju, sledile su primer Sjedinjenih Država i Francuske i izgradile baze u ovoj zemlji. Džibuti, vojni centar u jednom od najopasnijih područja na svetu, pokušava da maksimalno profitira od zavidne strateške lokacije na kojoj se nalazi.
Zbog čega je Pakistan bitan kineskim interesima na Bliskom Istoku? Zbog lokacije. Pogledajmo ovu mapu. Pakistan ne samo da graniči sa Kinom, već ima i izlaz na Omanski zaljev koji vodi do Hormuškog moreuza, a kroz Hormuški moreuz prolazi 35% svjetske morske trgovine. Zato je Kina odlučila izgraditi kinesko-pakistanski ekonomski koridor. Taj projekat, koji će u konačnici koštati $62 milijarde, a neki izvori tvrde čak i 82 milijarde, prostirat će se od grada Kašgar u pokrajini Xinjiang sve do luke Gvadar, koja se nalazi blizu Irana i Omanskog zaljeva. Kašgar i Gvadar će povezati moderni autoputevi i željezničke pruge za brži i efikasniji prijevoz proizvoda. To je glavna tačka na kineskom putu svile, poznatom kao inicijativa Pojas i put. Na primjer, ako Kina želi svoje proizvode poslati teretnim brodom iz luke Šangaj u recimo luku Salala u Omanu, taj brod bi morao putovati sedmicama, proći kroz tijesni malajski prolaz i biti izložen piratskim napadima sve dok ne stigne do svog odredišta. Koristio bi mnogo nafte, a uz to bi morao platiti visoke cijene za osiguranje, budući da se osiguranje morske trgovine naplaćuje po danu. Izgradnjom kinesko-pakistanskog ekonomskog koridora, koji izlazi u luci Gvadar, kontejner sa kineskim proizvodima bi se transportovao drumskim saobraćajem, a zatim brodom do luke Salala u Omanu. Put bi trajao svega nekoliko dana i koštao bi drastično manje. Budući da je Kina druga najveća ekonomija svijeta, te da se 40% njene trgovine odvija kroz Južno kinesko more, ova kopnena ruta kroz Pakistan će smanjiti troškove, skratiti vrijeme i sigurnija je. Cijena transporta jednog kontejnera od grada Kašgara na zapadu Kine do destinacije u Arapskom zaljevu smanjit će se za $1.450. Isto tako, cijena transporta jednog kontejnera za evropske destinacije smanjit će se za $1.350. Korištenjem pakistansko-kineskog koridora vrijeme transporta se smanjuje za 25 dana prema evropskim destinacijama i 21 dan prema bliskoistočnim. To su ogromne uštede kineskim firmama i čine ih konkurentnim na tržištu. Put iz Kašgara prema Bliskom Istoku, umjesto da ide morskim putem iz Šangaja, sada se skraćuje za 11.000 km, a prema Evropi za 13.000 km. Idemo sada do Atine gdje se nalazi Burton, autor knjige Kina i bliskoistočni sukobi i profesor međunarodnih odnosa u Briselu. Professor Burton, hello and welcome to the Al Jazeera Balkans channel. Now let me start by asking you, we know that China was present in the Middle East back in the 50s and 60s in Egypt, in Algeria, in Somalia and in Palestine. However, since the end of the Cold War, it was the US that dominated the Middle East. However, nowadays I have a feeling that over the past couple of years that China is making a comeback. Do you agree with this? And if yes, why now?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on the show. And, to sort of answer your question, I think, the important thing is to sort of think about China as actually coming back is a very good way of describing it, because China did have a presence in the Middle East in the late 60s or so. And that was very much more of a political relationship. It was very much sort of driven by ideology and support for, insurgent groups like the Palestinian and Algerian nationalists, as well as in Eritrea and also in the Gulf. Then in the 1970s, it took a bit of a back step. It started to pursue more diplomatic relations. And then from the late 70s and into the 80s, it started to pursue a more economic approach. And that has pretty much continued until today. But what is different about that earlier period in the 1980s compared to today is that obviously global position has changed substantially. It is now the second largest economy in the world. Trading relationships with China, and so for that reason, China matters in the Middle East in a way that it didn't, a couple of decades ago.
Now, has China managed to balance its relations with different Arab countries by largely avoiding any direct involvement in regional conflicts? I mean, what stance has China taken when it comes to the GCC dispute, to the war in Yemen, in Syria, in Libya?
Yeah, so China's relationship, as I said, is very much one that's kind of economically driven. But it's not just about, which obviously was an important consideration from the 1980s onwards. Obviously, that fueled, helped China's development at home. China's relationship has become much more substantive than that. It covers alternative energy sources, as well as investment in real estate, property, the health sector. But what's interesting is that it tries to separate itself from the politics. And so it's not keen on getting caught up in the tensions and conflicts which are taking place in the region and which have become much more prominent in the last decade since the Arab Spring. I mean, in the Gulf, you alluded to, China has very much taken a position that it doesn't want to get caught up in the differences between the Arab Gulf states like Saudi Arabia on the one side and Iran on the other. It says it can have good relationships with both sides. But I think one of the things it's finding itself doing is treading a very cautious line in that respect. So what it's doing is it's hedging its bets, which is also helped by the countries involved. The Gulf states themselves and Iran, they're very keen, very happy to maintain the relationship they have with China. It works for them. So they don't necessarily want to try and bring China into becoming a security partner. And China hasn't volunteered to do that either.
So it's mostly economic cooperation these days, but how militarily involved is China in the Middle East?
So in terms of actual military presence on the ground, not much. That said, in the last couple of years...
But they have a base in Djibouti, right?
Yes, in Djibouti, exactly. It's opened a naval base there. And primarily, I think its concern there is with sort of the Red Sea, is with trade through the Red Sea and through the Suez Canal. It builds on what China was doing, from around 2009, when it also sent warships into the area to prevent, piracy happening there, which was also something that other Western countries were doing as well. The interesting thing is that the Chinese, participate in those efforts, but they tried to avoid getting involved in any kind of collaboration. So it operates, but on an independent basis. So it doesn't really have a military presence as such. That said, when Islamic State was sweeping across Syria and Iraq, China recognized, the threat that this was provoking. Obviously, Islamic State had made, appeals to Muslims, in China to support, to support them against the Muslims in China against the state. And so, of course, there was a sense of, we need to support our partners there, but in a very discreet, sort of low-key fashion. So not like, the West did, which was to send troops in.
Right. Now, as China's Belt and Road Initiative takes shape in the Middle East in the form of finance and infrastructure projects, can it result in greater competition among various Middle Eastern countries to attract more Chinese investment and interest? I mean, can the BRI become a source of conflict among Middle Eastern states?
Absolutely, and that's actually one of the points that I make in my book. The Chinese don't see it that way. They've presented it very much as a mutually beneficial project that both sides will do very well out of. But of course, it's finite resources, and so that means there's going to be a little bit of competition by the countries involved to get hold of that money and investment. That said, of course, it's not, you mustn't look at the Middle East as a blank canvas for China. There are certain countries where China does more, has more investment, has more trade, is much more concerned about than in other parts of the region. And so it's very likely that Belt and Road funding will go there. We've also got to take in mind as well that, in this last couple of years, there has been sort of some a reaction to Belt and Road in terms of the efficiency and effectiveness of the funding. So there has been a little bit of retrenchment, and we may well see that playing out in the Middle East in the years coming ahead.
Now, Professor Burton, do you think Tehran's new strategic partnership with Beijing will give China a strategic foothold in the region and, in a way, strengthen Iran's economy and its regional clout? I mean, we know that they signed a 25-year-long agreement.
Yes, and that's what, that's an interesting question to raise, because there's been a bit of discussion since the summer about that 25-year agreement. This actually builds on something that, the Chinese and Iranians were talking about 4 years ago. I don't think there's actually been, money put behind it as such. So it's been sort of ratcheted up as possibly leading to Iran taking a much more active, or benefiting China, but benefiting Iran much more significantly. The fact is that Iran and China do have a relationship that goes back a number of decades, but it is one that is imbalanced. So Iran needs China far more than China needs Iran. But that said, it can work in tandem. It can work quite well for them, especially in areas where the West finds itself set apart from Iran. So if we think about over the nuclear program, China has played a role in bringing Iran and the West together in relation to the JCPOA from a few years ago, and also on the question of sanctions before that. But so China can actually play quite a useful role in place where the United States and Europe can't.
Well, so should the US and EU be worried about China's relationship with Tehran?
Well, I think it can actually, like I was saying, I think it can actually work quite well. I mean, it will not, obviously, China will not take a role that, it is completely in line with the Europeans and the Americans and what they want. China sees itself very much as an independent actor. But where their interests are aligned, there is the scope for collaboration and cooperation. But you've also got to keep in mind that, China and Iran's relationship, much as it's closer than that between Iran and the West, is also influenced by the West and especially America. So when the prospect of American relations with China is better, China will veer towards America.
Right.
As far as the Chinese are concerned, the most important relationship is with the United States, not with Iran.
Right, Guy Burton, it was great speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Neki to nazivaju novom velikom igrom Kine na Bliskom Istoku. Kina investira, jača diplomatske veze i tjesno sarađuje po pitanju odbrane i sigurnosti sa ključnim državama tog regiona. Kako na to reaguju arapski lideri i zbog čega u Kini vide pouzdanog partnera, saznajte u nastavku. Detaljnije o kineskom utjecaju u Pakistanu pojašnjava nam Manzoor Khan Afridi, profesor međunarodnih odnosa u Islamabadu. Professor Manzoor, hello and welcome to the Al Jazeera Balkans channel. Now, Pakistan's desire to become a strategic partner of China has resulted in the creation of the multi-billion-dollar China-Pakistan economic corridor. Tell us more about this mega project. And does Beijing aim to expand its influence in the Gulf of Oman and in the Arabian Gulf with such a project? And will this come at the expense of its Pakistan's relations with the United States?
Well, it's really important. Both Pakistan and China have started China-Pakistan Economic Corridor back in 2015. No doubt that China and Pakistan, they are strategic partners and they are time-tested friends. Now, this huge China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, this project will bring prosperity not only to China and Pakistan, but for the entire region. Of course, many projects, they are involved under the umbrella of this CPEC. This is infrastructure project that various roads, railway tracks, and also the fiber optic, those would be constructed between China and Pakistan. There are so many energy projects, the coal energy, wind energy, the hydro energy, and also the coal power plants. Those would be established where the first phase of the CPEC has already completed. And now both countries, they are going to start and launch the second phase of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So the first phase of the CPEC was mainly, that was about the energy projects. And now in the second phase, there is cooperation between two countries in science and technology, and also in agriculture and special economic zones, and also the mass industrialization. So that's really important for a developing country like Pakistan, that in the history it is for the first time that a foreign country in the shape of China that is investing in Pakistan. Third, that is the development of the Gwadar seaport. So it is a deep sea port located to the southern part of Pakistan. So then there an oil refinery would be established with the help of Saudi Arabia. And also now Pakistan is going to have opening ceremony of the Gwadar mega city. And there would also be already the international airport of Gwadar has been inaugurated by Pakistan. And it is one of the largest airports located within Pakistan. Now,
This was exactly my next question. China has taken over the management of the Gwadar port, which is en route to key Hormuz Straits shipping lanes. This move has prompted nerves in India. How significant is this port to China, and what does Pakistan stand to gain from it?
Well, China has already initiated the One Belt, One Road initiative. Sometimes it's also called Belt and Road Initiative back in 2013. So this CPEC and also now Gwadar is a part of this BRI projects of China. So Gwadar seaport, it will directly link the Arab states and the Gulf states with that of the western parts of China. So it can provide the shortest route to China and very safe. For example, if we take the range, the distance, that is almost 27 or 2,800 kilometers from Gwadar to the Kashgar city of China. And if China shipments, they are already, from the Gulf states, from the Gulf of Oman, from the Arab states to that of the Shanghai port. So that is about 12,000 kilometers. So of course, it can reduce the logistics, also the cost, and also the time. And the Strait of Malacca dilemma, which is very important in international relations, it has also have negative impacts on China. So that can also be avoided. And no doubt this Gwadar port, it can also have strategic importance for China as well, because now with the growing Indian intentions, with the growing India and the United States cooperation in relationship, especially after the signing of the BECA, the bilateral exchange and cooperation agreement between New Delhi and Washington. So China is very much enthusiastic, and it has a zeal to reach Gwadar and to complete Gwadar seaport as soon as possible to have maximum outreach in the Indian Ocean region.
Right. Now, Professor, successive civilian and military governments in Pakistan over the past decades have looked to Beijing as their principal backer against India. Now, is China a reliable partner to Islamabad?
Well, there is no doubt that various civilian governments as well as the military governments in Pakistan and even military the armed forces of Pakistan, they have always trusted in China. Both countries, they are time-tested friends. And of course, no doubt that those are strategic partners. And interesting thing is that there is no objection almost from Pakistan to have this kind of friendship with the People's Republic of China. And if we see the history of Pakistan-China relations, so those were mainly covered by the defense agreements and the military cooperation. Now, with the launching and with the execution of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, now both countries, they are moving towards more economic and comprehensive relationship, even to have an increase in people-to-people contact. So China is trusted in Pakistan in military circle, in civilian circle, in political circle, and also on the level of the masses. I mean, between the people of Pakistan and the people of People's Republic of China. So China has been regarded as a reliable strategic partner of Pakistan.
Now, some analysts have warned about the so-called debt trap diplomacy when it comes to borrowing money from China. For example, Sri Lanka's experience with the deep-sea port of Hambantota is a cautionary tale. Similar lending experiences and deals have been seen in Djibouti and in Greece. Is anyone in Pakistan worried that a similar scenario may play out with the Gwadar port?
There are some suspicions even in Pakistan among the people, but I don't think so at the government level. Government is very much optimistic about the relationship and cooperation between Islamabad and Beijing. And as far as the question of Gwadar seaport is concerned, if we compare it with the Hambantota seaport of Sri Lanka, so I don't think so, because the Sri Lanka's geographical position, the Sri Lanka's relationship with Pakistan, and Sri Lanka's relationship with India, that has been very much different from Pakistan and Pakistan's relationship with China. So what Pakistan can provide China, geostrategically and geographically, Sri Lanka can't provide. And another thing that Pakistan is very much needed for China, not only for the economic reach, for the energy supply, but geostrategically it is really important, because Pakistan, it is the second largest country in South Asia, and also second biggest country in the SAARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, where China is also an observer, and China is striving its best to have a full-fledged permanent membership in SAARC. So Pakistan is not worried about the debt trap policy. I think it was very much elaborated in 2018 by the US Vice President Mike Pence, when he was pointing towards that now we should build a relationship with other countries, not on the China style, which is the debt trap policy, but on a comprehensive package delivered to other countries. So I think in connection and in cooperation between Pakistan and China, this thing won't happen. And Gwadar seaport, it can't be a copy and an example of that of Hambantota seaport.
Right. Professor Manzoor, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you very much.
Kineska pokrajina Xinjiang direktno vodi kroz centralnu Aziju do zemalja Bliskog Istoka. Stoga, ono što se dešava na Bliskom Istoku utiče ne samo na kineske ekonomske interese, nego i na kinesku sigurnosnu situaciju kod kuće. U vremenu kada arapske države tragaju za novim saveznicima i investitorima, Kina se pojavljuje kao ozbiljan novi igrač. Poštovani gledaoci, bilo je to sve u ovom izdanju emisije Granice Istoka. Ako ste propustili bilo koji dio, emisiju možete pogledati na našoj web stranici balkans.aljazeera.net. Hvala na pažnji.